Welcome to Roil Road, where we ask the question, what road are we all on and how do we navigate it? Today, Brian Martinez and I will be discussing the role of bullying among adults in our society. Cancel culture is part of it, but it goes beyond that. Specifically, we will talk about research about bullying prevalence in schools, Will Smith at the Oscars, Trump bullying Mike Pence after the 2020 election, and Oberlin College cancel culture bullying a local business, which resulted in Oberlin losing $33 million in a defamation lawsuit. But first, let me tell you about Roil. Roil is a better way to enjoy content online. Today's internet is under the domination of a handful of tech giants. The power of these platforms lies in their huge network of users who mutually attract each other, those who post and share content, and those who enjoy that content. This triggers a snowballing network effect where everybody wants to be where everybody already is. New competitors struggle to gain traction because they can only offer a fraction of the content and a fraction of the audience of the established giant. Some startups have tried to find market niches based on political orientation, but this is a poor solution. The real problem is that the post and share network model inevitably results in monopolies. Roil presents a new model. Using RSS, a foundational but underutilized internet technology, Roil collects data from across the internet and presents it to you in a thoroughly modern and feature-rich way. Because of RSS, Roil from the start has a vast library of content. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and websites. You simply choose your favorite content creators and personalize Roil so that it shows you the content that you want. The Roil community shares, organizes, and discusses what they follow, using all the features you've come to expect from a modern platform. Roil's ability to start with a vast content library does come with a limitation. We do not show images because we respect all creators' intellectual property rights, and we will not show any creative content without their permission. But we can show you what you need, such as the title, creator name, and when it was released. The full experience is just a click away. Within Roil, creators can claim their feeds and grant us permission to better showcase their content, such as including images. For these creators, Roil serves as an insurance policy against the host where they post their content. If the creator chooses to relocate to a different platform for posting, Roil lets them bring their subscribers with them from the old feed to the new one. You may ask, how do we know that Roil won't ever become a monopoly that abuses its power? The answer to this lies in Roil's new model. For the very reason that Roil is able to start with a rich library of content, a new competitor to Roil would have this same advantage. Our window of opportunity to solve the problem of post and share internet giants is closing. Much of the internet still supports RSS, but that proportion is diminishing, largely because platforms recognize that RSS diminishes their hold over their network of users. Users should insist that platforms support RSS. I created Roil because there were lots of different content sources I wanted to keep up with, but who has the time to manually rotate across lots of different web pages? If we insist that platforms distribute enough information for users to stay aware of posting activity without having to live on their website, then it is possible for people to receive updates about new content from multiple sources all in one place. Roil is a better way to enjoy content online. Power should lie with creators and users, not with the tech platform that connects them. I hope you will be part of the solution. I hope to see you on Roil. Now, let's get this show on the road. Brian, hello. So good to see you.
Good to see you too, John.
We have a very interesting topic. Things are good. We have a very interesting topic today, and that is the role of bullying in our culture. And people typically think of bullying as a schoolyard problem, but I think that everyone would be tuned into the fact that bullying is happening a lot among adults right now and is an important fact in shaping how people behave. So I'm going to kick this off with a study, or rather a report of a study from Psychology Today on trends in bullying among kids up through high school. And their analysis suggests that, bottom line, that bullying has not really diminished despite the prevalence of anti-bullying campaigns that are trying to put a damper on it. So let me share this article. Okay, Psychology Today is reporting, and this is from 2020, that U.S. high school bullying rates are not going down. And it starts by talking about what is bullying as this is the CDC's definition. I think it's a reasonable definition. So according to stopbullying.gov, the CDC outlines 3 core elements. Notably, the definition of bullying is about actions, behavior, not intent. Now, there's, in a lot of contexts, a question of, is it appropriate to be removing an intent element? And I think that in the context of bullying, it really is quite appropriate. And so that would be a situation where the bully is not necessarily thinking about the emotions or the impact that their conduct is having on the bullied person. It might be an excessive teasing and not realizing that this is actually cutting deep. So I think that it makes sense that the actions and behavior is the appropriate measure. So bullying does not have to be malicious or purposeful. That follows along with that it's not about the intent, and it is unwanted aggressive behavior conducted where there is an observed or perceived power imbalance, and there's repetition or a high likelihood of repetition of bullying behaviors. And when bullying occurs among students, less than half of them tell an adult. There has been a lot of talk about attempts to diminish bullying in schools. There's been a focus on that, and unfortunately, Psychology Today is finding that the bullying is not going down overall, although it's changing in form. So they write, is bullying declining in the United States? To look at this question, researchers analyzed bullying research in BMC Public Health database from 2020 of over 72,000 high schoolers, so 9th through 12th graders. Data was pulled from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and they were asked about traditional victimization and then another form of victimization, which is relational bullying, okay, that happens in the context of cyberbullying or in other contexts. The
like
main findings,
reputation destruction,
exactly.
like mean girls, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. What I have talked about in a prior episode as political relational aggression. So it's relational aggression that is, and I mean political here in the sense of, for example, office politics. It's relational aggression surrounding who likes who in the social setting, who is ostracized. So the main finding is that bullying rates did not decline from 2011 to 2019 and remained steady at about 20%. And therefore, on the face, anti-bullying initiatives are not working. Cyberbullying rates were above 15% and over 60% in the sample reported both. So of the students who reported experiencing cyberbullying, 60% of them reported traditional bullying as well. Female students were significantly more likely to be bullied for both of the types, with 23% reporting traditional bullying versus 16% for boys. But then in the cyber or relational bullying, it's much higher. So 21% of girls reported the cyber relational bullying versus about 10% of boys. Now, one thing that is not addressed in this write-up is that you don't necessarily have similar survey response behavior types between boys and girls. It is probably a greater admission, a greater psychological hit for the boy to admit bullying, and so that could skew the results. And I would say that one way to see that is that I think that for a boy to report that he's the victim of bullying, if he's to do that, he's probably going to thereby cause more girls to not be interested in him, right?
Yeah, or more bullying from whoever.
Right, but right. I think that that it remains true that the girl doesn't particularly want to be with the guy that she would perceive as having been bullied, and that probably the inverse is not nearly as true. Mm-hmm. They write, it isn't clear why and that's just my perception of the state of affairs. It isn't clear why anti-bullying efforts don't seem to be working. Study authors suggest that this may be because initiatives reduce verbal and physical bullying, but not relational bullying. And I'm pointing this out because relational bullying is going to be a topic sort of throughout this conversation and is what is most notable these days among adults. And so this relational bullying is reportedly the most common form of bullying in US students, especially girls.
Yep, makes sense. I was thinking that relational bullying is not just applies to what we're talking about, but I think it's the most in today's social media world. It's probably the most common. I looked at a study where a while back where most of the social, let's say, atmosphere of, say, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, is dominated by young women, and they use it to destroy other women. Because and that it makes sense because it's a social environment, right? I think that with boys, as a substitute teacher, I didn't see tons of bullying, but most of it, when I did see it, was just physical. And not that makes it okay, but it was also resolvable, quickly.
So the frame that I want to add to the discussion of the instances of bullying, the famous instances of bullying that have happened recently, is that we seem to be in a culture that will witness bullying happening and then be unable to even acknowledge or appropriately react to the fact that that bullying has occurred. And so therefore the bullying just keeps amplifying up. And the first example I want to talk about in that regard is Will Smith at the Oscars. And this is such a famous, well-known story. I'm not going to go into detail. I assume that everybody listening is familiar. Obviously, Chris Rock, in presenting at the Oscars, told a joke at the expense of Will Smith's wife, and Will Smith then walked up onto the stage from the audience and slapped Chris Rock across the face and returned to a seat, and then delivered his famous lines of, keep my wife's name out of your mouth. This was a perfect example. So traditional bullying, this is not relational bullying at all. Traditional bullying that you might expect to see between boys in a schoolyard that isn't being attended very well by teachers. And the remarkable thing to me in watching this unfold is how you have a huge audience. Will Smith does this thing that is just outlandish, beyond the pale. I don't think this has ever happened before. And the audience sits there stunned, sort of watching each other's reactions. Like, this can't be okay. This can't be okay. He can't do this. Wait, okay, nobody else is doing anything. Maybe it's okay. Okay, this is okay. We're just going to keep going as if this didn't happen. And there was a total failure to even acknowledge that the bullying occurred, to the point where later where Will Smith was not asked to leave. Later in the award ceremony, Will Smith won the Best Actor award and famously received a standing ovation from the audience. It's astounding to me that this audience of adults, high status adults who are looked up to throughout our society, found itself just unable to even acknowledge that the bullying occurred. Moreover, Will Smith was not charged. I submit he should be charged. Okay, and it still could happen. Obviously, it's unlikely that the DA would charge him. It has been framed in the media as though whether Will Smith is going to be charged is Chris Rock's decision. That's not true. It's for the district attorney or the police to charge him. The idea that you would leave that question in the hands of Chris Rock doesn't make any sense. He obviously has every incentive to not make a big deal of it, try to make this go away. Victims of bullying are so frequently in that situation. That's why, as discussed in the previous, most students who are bullied don't report the bullying to an adult. The idea that we would leave that we'd be like, well, Chris Rock is the one who decides. That's nonsense. This was a open, brazen, notorious assault. We all saw it. We should not be waiting for the bullied person to weigh in. All of the reason now let me say this as well. I am usually not the person who would say a minor assault necessarily needs to be charged in all cases, because I recognize there are concerns about people falling into the system, and that now they lose their job, or they become unemployable, and it's the start of a series of events that leads their life to dissolve. That's not going to happen to Will Smith. Okay, he wouldn't go to jail. I'm not saying that should happen. I'm saying that the system should do something. He should have to take a plea deal, do some community service, and then the system would have addressed the problem. And if he repeat offended, he would be treated as a repeat offender. That would be appropriate. Now, what actually happened was that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts gave a nominal punishment that he doesn't get to attend the Oscars for 10 years. I wouldn't want to attend the Oscars more than 1 year. Right? Who wants to sit through that show? It is not a material punishment. So that's the first example, classic bullying. And the point is that we had an inability to recognize and respond to the fact that the bullying occurred either at the show or through the avenues of last resort, which would be law enforcement.
Yeah. Well, there was at least security, but they didn't step in, right? Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think that is everything as you said. And the problem is that if we allow this without, I mean, I'm sure that like regular people had their opinions on this. The problem is if we allow this to be the way that we resolve, people telling jokes or anything that is unpleasant, we actually, to some small degree, make the world more violent because we permit it. And then we permit the use of violence as a way to resolve conflicts or discomfort. And I think that has far-reaching bad consequences.
What a great segue to the next minor story that I need to bring up, because we talked about the Will Smith thing, and this is not what I would characterize necessarily as a bullying event. So also famously, I'm not going to go into this in detail, I assume people know, a few weeks after the Will Smith event, Dave Chappelle was attacked on stage. There's nothing definitive to say that one was related to the other, inspired by the other. But I would say this. When you're at a show, there is some subset of aggressive people who have always had in the back of their mind the thought, what if I went up there and pounded the person on the stage? What if I did that? What would happen? And they have been held at bay by this supposition that clearly everyone would understand that that's far beyond the pale. Clearly something really horrible would happen to me if I were to go and do that. And Will Smith's handling, the way that situation was handled, demonstrated that that's not necessarily the case. And it's difficult for me to see the Dave Chappelle situation without assuming that this was in the back of the guy's head, that it has been normalized to an extent that it is possible to assault a person on stage, that intuitively we would think that even though there might not be a law in the book saying this, that the person on stage, if you go up there and attack him, that it's going to be a more grievous response that you're going to receive. But Will Smith proved to the world that that's not a rule. And so it's hard for me to believe that this Dave Chappelle attacker was not inspired to at least some degree by the fact that Will Smith was not punished.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I also think that like there is, it is everything as you described it. And also I think there's again, this goes back to the violence aspect. If Will Smith, for example, had simply shouted from his seat without going up on stage and attacking Chris Rock, that would have probably been that would have been preferable, and it would have probably still given us an outcome that we could all accept, even if Will Smith made things, let's say, a little awkward by getting so emotional over a joke that Chris Rock had made. But there was no line that's crossed there. I mean, it's a little childish, it's probably better to just let it go. But there was no line crossed. But because he did cross that line, and the Academy and the people that were there, they just let it go. They assume that in this case, I guess, violence is okay. And I know some people say, well, it's just a slap. No, it's violence. It does, it's assault. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a clenched fist or an open hand. That crosses a line, obviously. And I think that in the case of Chappelle, the guy who attacked him, was likely, at least in part, encouraged by that, which is this idea that you can respond to words with violence under some circumstances, which I think was the rationalization that guy, I forget his name, Lee, I think, what he used to validate, going up on stage with what appeared to be a knife disguised as a gun, which is the strangest thing I've ever heard of, in order to assault Dave Chappelle. I mean, if people hadn't swept in, what if he stabbed him? We don't know. And so, this is, I think this is also a product of, there is this notion where a lot of people don't know where the line between words and violence is, because there are many people who believe that some words, that are said can be fought back with violence. There is that saying, like, talk shit, get hit. And I don't think it's appropriate under any circumstances. I'm an absolutist on that. I've drawn a hard line on that. If there is a conflict that you need to resolve through physical combat, then you challenge the guy like we used to. You don't just run up on stage and try to ambush him, which is essentially what happened in both of those cases. And I think that is another aspect. I think that people think if they feel put upon by the words of someone, they can respond to that with physical violence, and that makes it acceptable. And I think that we have to go and draw a line and say this is unacceptable, right? So, and I know that you want to give another example of relational bullying, so maybe I'll bring this up later, but I do want to ask about potential solutions or the causes, because the fact that the study says we haven't been able to change this, I have a thought on that. So, but anyway, go on.
So,
sorry about that.
I'm very interested to hear your thought. The thing I was going to say next is that when grown-ups hear about kids being bullied, traditionally, a lot of grown-ups have struck the attitude that's like, well, that's a problem that you're going to have to figure out how to solve. I don't get bullied as a grown-up, so therefore I've solved that problem. I wouldn't get bullied. And what we're seeing now is a real demonstration that no, the grown-ups never solve the problem of how to react when they're bullied. Grown-ups are just as easy to cow as children, even though we should develop, and it is to our discredit in our society that grown-ups have not developed a way, both individually but especially collectively, to come together and say, we all saw it, we all recognize that this bullying has happened, and it needs to be stopped. Mm-hmm. And courage is a muscle that grows the more you use it. And where you're just seeing that the grown-ups have allowed that courage muscle to atrophy. Now, the example that I gave just now, Will Smith, petty example compared to what I'm about to talk about next. Next is the most brazen, high-stakes example of bullying that I can recall. That it is just appalling to see the person in this position engaging in bullying in this way. And that is the bullying that Donald Trump did to specifically Mike Pence, but to other people in the fallout of the 2020 election. And the story that we have for that is a brief one, but it is about an interview that Trump gave quite some time after the January 6th situation. And there are two pieces of the interview that are noteworthy, that are talked about here. So the first piece is Trump is presented with the crowd chanting, "Hang Mike Pence" at the Capitol during the January 6th riot, and doesn't have any particular response, shrugs it off. That's wild to me that he would do that. But the bullying situation that I want to talk about is Jonathan Karl from ABC News, and we have the audio of this, presented Trump with the question, saying, there's a report, excuse my language, this is Karl talking, there's a report that you talked to him that morning, January 6th, and told him, you can be a patriot or you can be a pussy. Did you really say that, or is that incorrect? And Trump said, I wouldn't dispute it.
It had been reported back in January by the New York Times that Trump even pressured Pence on the morning of January 6th with a crude phone call. When I interviewed Trump for Betrayal, I asked him about that.
There was a report, excuse my language, not mine, it was in the report, that you talked to him that morning and you said you could be a patriot or you can be a... Did you really say that, or is that a incorrect...
I wouldn't dispute it.
Really?
I wouldn't dispute it.
Okay, so clearly this happened. We all know that Trump was trying to put tremendous pressure on Mike Pence to simply not accept the outcome of the 2020 election, the highest stakes situation we could imagine. And here he is. This is a classic example of traditional bullying, one-on-one. It's not about, that particular conversation is not about political relational aggression, although Trump does that as well, in motivating the mob to sort of crushing Pence's reputation among the mob, stirring them up against him. And this case of bullying, there has been a response to on the political left. The political left has been able to identify, look, this is totally unacceptable. But on the political right, there are people that are seeing it for what it is, but it's a case of just this troubling denial, where they are not able to recognize the bullying for what it was. Now, the final example I have is a classic cancel culture bullying campaign that Oberlin College conducted against a local business, accusing it of racism. And this one I'm going to have some detail on. It has been the subject of a defamation lawsuit that Oberlin College lost to the company. Originally, with a jury verdict of about $45 million that would need to be paid. The judge reduced that amount. That happens fairly regularly in punitive damages cases, especially, that the judge will consider the amount excessive and reduce it, but didn't reduce it to any minor number. The reduced number is still, I think, $33 million. And Oberlin College appealed that, and now has lost the appeal and is now expected to have to pay it. And maybe they'll appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court. But as it stands, they're going to have to pay north of $30 million for this, for the damage that they did, and well deserved that they're going to have to pay that. And I'm going to be going through this appellate court opinion. Okay, so this is from the Ohio Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the essential element here is that brings Oberlin into liability is the participation of their Dean of Students, Meredith Raimondo. Now, as I go through this, I want to first set the stage to understand how to read an appellate decision. The appellate court is not in the position of finding the facts. Okay, this is what happened, this is true, etc. Instead, it was the jury that rendered a verdict based on evidence that they heard. And the appellate court's standard of review, their role is to evaluate the evidence that was presented and determine, could a reasonable jury have found the judgment that they found based on the evidence? And the appellate court finds that yes, they could. So the opinion reads, this court begins by reciting facts relevant to this appeal, emphasizing that many of these facts are recited only for the purpose of providing the background under which the controversy arose. Gibson's Bakery is a bakery and convenience store located in Oberlin, Ohio, close to the college campus. It has been run by the Gibson family for more than 130 years and has a long-standing relationship with the college, its students and employees, and the surrounding community. It's owned by Alan W. Gibson and his son, David R. Gibson, and also working at the store is another Alan Gibson. Okay, so there's the grandfather, Alan Gibson, and then sort of the grandson, Alan Gibson, who will be referred to later in the opinion as young Alan. Okay, so that's who young Alan is. Oberlin College is a private liberal arts college and conservatory of music that has been operated in Oberlin, Ohio since the 1830s. When this dispute arose, many Oberlin students had been protesting and otherwise expressing their dissatisfaction with the treatment of people of color by the college. The controversy arose following an incident at the bakery on November 9th, 2016. According to the testimony admitted at the hearing, 3 African-American Oberlin students, 1 male and 2 females, were in the bakery while young Alan was working. Young Alan later informed the police that he confronted the male students because he believed that the student was shoplifting wine and using a fake ID to purchase more alcohol, that the male student fled the store, and young Alan chased him across the street to apprehend and detain him for the police to arrive. When an officer responded to the scene, he observed that the 2 female students also became involved in the physical altercation between young Alan and the male student. The police arrested the 3 students. The students eventually entered guilty pleas and were convicted for their roles in the incident. Several college administrators testified that rumors about this incident at the bakery quickly reached members of the student body. Because many Oberlin students apparently believed that the 3 students had been racially profiled by young Alan, they announced that they planned to hold a protest outside the bakery beginning at 11 a.m. the following day. Although the record does not disclose details about who prepared the flyer, which was a 1-page flyer prepared to be distributed during the protest, the flyer urged a boycott of the bakery, asserting that it was a, quote, racist establishment with a long account of racial profiling and discrimination. Okay, so this is the flyer. It says that it's a racist establishment with a long history of racial profiling. Mm-hmm. The flyer also gave an account of the, quote, heinous events involving the owners of the establishment, and stated that Alan Gibson had racially profiled the male student, improperly chased him out of the store, and assaulted him. Raimondo, the dean of students. Okay, so this is an important feature, that in order for the college to be held liable, it can't just be that the college students were acting foolishly. It has to be some employee, some agent of the college that has culpability enough to find the college itself liable. We're talking about the dean of students here. Raimondo learned about the planned protest shortly before it began. Early that morning, she met with other administrative and faculty members of the college, and several of them attended the protests. The parties would ultimately dispute what role, if any, Raimondo and the other college staff members played in distributing the flyer at the protest. So again, this is an appellate court decision, meaning that this appellate court is not going to find, we conclude that Raimondo did this exactly with the flyer. Instead, right, they're going to say, look, based on the circumstances and the evidence presented, was it reasonable for the jury to conclude that Raimondo was culpable? So then after the protest, there is a meeting of the Student Senate in order to pass a resolution pertaining to Gibson's Bakery. The opinion writes, The Student Senate held a meeting on the evening of November 10th and passed a Student Senate resolution, which is referred to later in this opinion as a Senate resolution. The Student Senate sent an FYI email with the student resolution attached to Raimondo, their faculty advisor, and the then president of the college, Marvin Krisloff. That same evening, the Student Senate emailed the Senate resolution to the entire student body. The Student Senate also posted the Senate resolution in its glass display case in the Student Center in Wilder Hall, where it remained posted for almost 1 year. Now, the contents of the resolution we're going to get to later in the opinion, so we'll put a pin on that. There's a resolution, and the college is aware of the resolution and is participating in the display of the resolution. Because of the incident at the bakery and in a claimed effort to appease the angry students, Raimondo testified that she instructed a subordinate to contact the college's supplier of food for its dining hall, Bon Appetit, and tell them to stop or halt supplying the college with food from the bakery. Okay, so here Raimondo is trying to make the claim that, look, it's the students that are pressuring us to do this in order to try and say that she's not actually the culpable one. The Gibsons also presented evidence that the members of Oberlin's senior administrative staff had communicated via several text and email messages to express their anger about the Gibsons pressing charges against the 3 Oberlin students and their feelings that the college should not work with the Gibsons to resolve the situation. For example, the interim assistant dean was present in court in August 2017 when the Oberlin students were convicted for their role in the November 2016 bakery incident. From the courthouse, she sent a text message to Raimondo stating that, quote, "This is the most egregious process," and that, quote, "I hope we rain fire and brimstone on the store." So she's very, very unhappy that the store is raising the defamation claim. The opinion goes on to write, Raimondo responded by thanking the assistant dean for going to court to be with the students. Another example was a text message sent by Raimondo after the student newspaper published a letter from a retired Oberlin professor which expressed criticism of the college's handling of the Gibson matter. Okay, now we get to the text message that I think is the most revealing of the pattern of what was happening here. And again, the appellate court doesn't highlight this especially because this is just one among many pieces of evidence that the jury heard, but this is the smoking gun in my mind. Raimondo sent a text message to another administrator that stated, quote, "F him. I'd say unleash the students if I wasn't convinced this needs to be put behind us."
Mm-hmm.
So she's saying that she is pulling the strings.
Yep.
Okay, that she is in the position to have the students go after them or not go after them. That they are the puppet. So this is the perfect example of political relational aggression.
By proxy,
where it
no
is,
less.
Yeah, a proxy, exactly. That they have their force that they can motivate to go after the victim that they want to target. And this is being done by the dean of students at the college. Prestigious college, important institution in Ohio. This is the dean of students is saying, well, I might unleash the students on them. During the next several months, the Gibsons believed that they lost business and became targets of what they perceived to be ongoing harassment by Oberlin and its students. They blamed Oberlin for repeated vandalism and property damage, and for Grandpa Gibson breaking his back while investigating the source of someone pounding on his apartment door in the middle of the night. According to the Gibsons, they suffered significant financial and emotional damage caused by the actions of Oberlin. The Gibsons filed this action, which ultimately proceeded to a jury trial. The jury entered verdicts for the Gibsons, individually and the business, on their claims for libel, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and the claim against Raimondo for intentional interference with business relationship. The jury also awarded attorney's fees and compensatory and punitive damages, which were later capped by the trial court. The court lays out the standard. To establish defamation, the plaintiff must show 1, that a false statement of fact was made, 2, that the statement was defamatory, 3, that the statement was published, 4, that the plaintiff suffered injury as a proximate result of the publication, and 5, that the defendant acted with the requisite degree of fault in publishing the statement. So we heard before that there was a flyer circulated at the protest. So there's two major events here. There's the flyer and the student resolution. This is the hub of the case. So the flyer at the protest. The flyer was a two-sided page. The front of the flyer began with a large font, bold-faced, "Don't buy," printed inside a template of an 8-point star, and included other pleas that people boycott the bakery and shop elsewhere. The back page of the flyer listed other local retailers for the students to find specific items. The libel claim focused on the following language on the front page of the flyer. "This is a racist establishment with a long account of racial profiling and discrimination. Today we urge you to shop elsewhere in light of a particularly heinous event involving the owners of the establishment and local law enforcement. A member of our community was assaulted by the owner of this establishment yesterday. A 19-year-old man was apprehended and choked by Alan Gibson of Gibson's Food Mart and Bakery. The young man was accompanied by two friends, was choked until the two forced Alan to let go. After the young man was free, Alan chased him across College Street and into Tappan Square. There, Alan tackled him and restrained him again until Oberlin police arrived. The three were racially profiled on the scene. They were arrested without being questioned and asked their names or read their rights. Two were released shortly after and charged with assault. The young man is being held in Lorain County Jail, charged with robbery. No bail until his arraignment this Friday at 8:30. If you have been victimized by this establishment in any capacity, we ask you to stand with us in support of our community member." So, there's a lot of allegations being thrown up against what happened here in this flyer. The defamation standard is that these have to be untrue. The jury found them to be untrue, which is to say there was not evidence of the racial profiling, of the history of racism. None of that was demonstrated to be anything but an attempt to stir up furor against the Gibson's Bakery. Now we have the second written document that proves the heart of the defamation claim, the Senate resolution. The Senate resolution was passed by Student Senate November 10th, 2016. It urged students to cease all support of the bakery and called upon the faculty and administration of the college to condemn the treatment of students of color by Gibson's Food Mart and Bakery. Rather than quoting the resolution in its entirety, the court will summarize and quote the most relevant portions at issue here. The resolution begins by acknowledging and condemning hatred and bigotry, as well as all acts of violence. It then details a few key facts about the Gibson's incident because we find them important to share. Quote, "A black student was chased and assaulted at Gibson's after being accused of stealing. Several other students attempted to prevent the assaulted student from receiving further injury. They were arrested and held by the Oberlin Police Department. In the midst of all this, Gibson's employees were never detained and were given preferential treatment by the police officers. Gibson's has a history of racial profiling and discriminatory treatment of students and residents alike." So, the Gibson's business was essentially destroyed, seriously damaged by this campaign that was, in my mind, organized or escalated or facilitated by the Dean of Students. That seems to be that the jury so found. So this was a case where this storied institution in Ohio, very prestigious educational institution, engaged in a relational bullying campaign against a essentially randomly targeted business because the business prosecuted a shoplifter. It's astounding to me that we're at the point where these institutions engage in bullying behavior like this. Now, because the Gibsons did assert their rights, at least in this case, there's redress. And that's what I have on Gibson's Bakery.
Well, okay, so I wanted to, I don't know if this is applicable to the Gibson's Bakery example, because it seems like it was one of those things that started out spontaneously, a couple of college students go into a shop. One of them says, I think I want to steal something. And they attempt to illegally purchase alcohol as well. And they get caught and they get in trouble. And then I think afterwards they went to the college and said, we've been racially profiled by this business. And because the colleges, and I think the more prestigious they are, the more inclined they are towards this kind of social justice way of viewing things, I think that they came to their defense and made it into a crusade without even really like knowing or considering the possibility that these people actually broke the law, and they just wanted to defend them, right? And so the dean got behind it. They decided to boycott and the whole bit, and of course that becomes the story. I think that we're talking about it because of the sort of political racial element, and we're not necessarily looking at, well, did a crime take place or not? Because that's the only thing that really matters. And, we're at this point, but because there's so many, I think there's just a lot of things that are moving in a similar direction. It certainly is an example of what you say, a relational bullying. But what I was going to bring up before was I was going to propose what a potential solution is to this, cultural sickness, really, because this is not uncommon. This is, it happens everywhere. It happens with people of all ages. And it's all about, essentially, it's rooted in advantage. When Will Smith decided to hit Chris Rock, he was taking advantage. I think on some level, he figured he wouldn't get punished. He felt like this was not a bad idea. Either that or he was more afraid of what his wife would say. But that's another story, which is also potentially a problem because I do think that she is psychologically and emotionally abusive to him. But yeah, he was doing what he thought he was going to get away with. The guy who got a charge, Dave Chappelle, on stage, was certain that what he was doing was right, even if he ended up going to jail. And by the way, he's only being charged with a misdemeanor to my knowledge. So he kind of is right because we are still permitting that. And we're talking about a guy with a knife. I don't see how. I mean, Dave Chappelle himself was like, I don't understand why this guy isn't in more trouble. Although, there are explanations, because sometimes the institutions like the government, they get behind the appropriate people and they don't really punish them. But then okay, so skipping all that, what is missing? What's wrong? Why haven't we been able to deal with this? Why hasn't bullying gone down in schools? Okay. It's only, I think, that because of social media, it's gone up. When kids didn't have cell phones like me when I was growing up, the only kind of bullying you could engage in would have been physical in-person bullying. So what I think the problem is that we have abandoned, I guess, like a more stoic look at the way that we live our life. So I think that on the one hand, bullying is always going to exist in some form because it's a flaw of human beings. But bullies are usually people who are themselves unable to resolve conflicts in their own life. And so they take it out on other people. And obviously the bullied are also, struggling with this. And I think that we need more resilience, because that's essentially what we're discussing is maturity. And that's what I think that's why we can accept that this happens with children, like boys and girls, like the way that they may do this to each other, because we're hoping that they will learn from their parents and from, other adults, like behaving in the appropriate way, that they will learn how they should act in the world. And I think that Stoicism has a lot to offer, but we don't talk about that anymore at all. That is like a forgotten those are forgotten virtues. And instead, the adults who are supposed to be involved with their children or working in schools, they should be the most involved with trying to get away from bullying behavior and at least showing the futility of it, because it is pretty futile. And also I remember when I was a substitute teacher, there was a kid that was bullying a boy that was bullying a girl by repeating something that she claimed annoyed her. And then because it annoyed her, he kept saying it because he wanted to annoy her. And I said, are you just trying to get her attention because you like her? And that just blew the whole thing up, right? He was like, I don't like her. And then he immediately stopped giving her attention and stopped doing that. And, it's just one way that I was able to extinguish that right off the bat but there's a number of ways that teachers can do that. But the problem is, just like to your Oberlin College example, they actually encourage that, right? If they think that it's somehow, I don't know, expedient to their desires. And I think that the problem is that the adults are now the children. And so the children are just doing what they think is okay because they're looking at the adults. And there is a serious lack in that. And you can look at the Will Smith thing. You can look at the Oberlin College thing, I think, and the Dave Chappelle thing. They're all really good examples of just that. So those were my thoughts. I think that talking about what would be the correct steps towards reducing the problem, I think it comes down to, first, we need to be stoic. We need to stop responding with our emotions, stop responding to every slight, because that's what the Will Smith thing was, right? And toughen up, Buttercup, So
see, your example is so fascinating, right? So are you doing that to get her attention because you like her, right? So what you just did was you very cleverly reversed the power dynamic, right? You threw in another variable to say, no, I look at this situation as she has power over you because you like her, right? In a very very clever way. That's great, right? And that's what needs to happen more broadly. That the audience that sees the bullying needs to switch the power dynamic, right? And needs to turn on the bully so that now the bully is the one in the lower power status.
Yeah. And again, the bullies will, because I think of the reason why I think I understand this is because I used to be bullied and I used to be a bully. And I was a bully because I was bullied. So it one grade, I'm in a school and I, made fun of a kid and then I threatened to beat him up after class or something, right? I can't remember. It was I was in 4th grade and it turned out the kid knew karate. And then we became friends. And then a couple of years later, I went to a new school. And then because I was the new kid, I was getting bullied. And then I got to, see what that was like. And I think that it helped me in a way, it helped me negotiate. I mean, I spoke to my parents about it. And that's another thing too, is that, parents, it's difficult to parent a child who's experiencing bullying because what you don't want to do is blow them off because then they feel like nobody cares. But you also don't want to sweep in and actually confront the bully because it makes them appear weak because now they're going to an adult authority to intervene on their personal problems. So ultimately, I think that in most cases, the best thing is to teach the child resilience and the ability to stand up for themselves. Because you can't, unless your child is the bully, that's a different thing that you have to deal with, but it's probably your fault that child is a bully. But if it's a child that's being bullied, if they learn to stand up to the bully, it almost doesn't matter if they're actually able to fight back. In most cases, that will end it right there, right? It's it's an old trope, but it's true.
So Ken Jennings, the Jeopardy champion, years ago published a book called Because I Said So, that was just a list of various facts. And one of them was about bullying. And I thought he had a very perceptive observation. And that was that grown-ups tend to tell kids to ignore the bully. And that's the worst possible advice. The bully is looking for a passive victim.
Yeah.
And so the better advice would be lash out in response whatever way you can.
Confront them. Yes.
Yeah.
And they won't know what to do with that because they're not expecting that, right? Especially if they assume that you're passive. And I think that, again, I did that with the kid, and where I said, well, why are you putting so much energy into getting her attention? It seems like, you want it, or something like that. I basically said, I think you might like her. And of course, all the kids were like, ooh, because it was like fourth grade, and he was tremendously shamed. Like he was like a beat. And afterwards, I cleared things up. I said, well, look, I don't really know. I just know that anyone who puts a lot of attention on trying to get a reaction from somebody else, it says a lot about you. It doesn't really say much about her. And he changed his behavior completely after that. That whole week, he was just kept to his seat and was powerless. So, I mean, that week of substitute teaching I did. But yeah, I don't know. I have an understanding of that. So I think from personal experience.
All right. Well, as things change so much, and technology especially has changed our culture a lot, our culture needs to grow. People need to develop new skills. And hopefully this is one that people are starting to internalize, the need to find the courage to, when you witness the bullying, identify it and react to it. As I've listed today, there are some recent examples of epic failures in that regard, but hopefully we will get better at it.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's great talking to you as always, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for watching. You can download the Roil app at your app store by searching for Roil Mobile or Roil Technology. Or you can sign up at roil.com. We'll see you there.